One afternoon, Larry was in South Plainsville sheds. He had just finished a run on his branch line and was having a rest before his next train. After Coletta had passed by with a line of freight cars, he saw a man and a little boy walking towards him. It was Dennis, the man that worked at South Plainsville Station making announcements, and his son Adien. Adien was really fascinated with trains, and Dennis often brought him down to the yard to see the engines. "Hello, Dennis. Hello, Adien," Larry greeted them cheerfully. The father and son replied in kind. "Adien here had a half day at school, so I thought I'd bring him down to the yard to see the engines." "Can you tell me a story, Larry, please?" asked Adien. "Sure," replied Larry. I could tell you about that time I lost my whistle." "You told me that one already," Adien replied. "Or I could tell you about the time Andrew tried to get into the Navy Yard," suggested Larry. "You told me that one too." Larry thought and thought. "Oh, I know," he said at last. "I could tell you about what happened to Sion last week." And this is the story Larry told him. When the summer season ends, there's less travel until the holiday season. This means trains get shorter. Over the past few days, Larry began to notice something strange about Sion's trains. For a few days, he saw he had a boxcar in his train, but shrugged it off as thinking he was carrying mail and express. But one other day, he saw he had a random hopper at the end of his train. And the day after that, a flat car. After that, Larry had to find out why. One evening, Larry found him in the yard. "Sion, why do you have random freight cars on your passenger trains?" "Because my train is only 6 cars," he answered. Larry raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" he questioned. "I never take 6 cars on my train," explained Sion. "It's my unlucky number." "Nonsense," chuckled Larry. "There's nothing wrong with the number 6. "Larry, trust me, there is," affirmed Sion. The next day, there was track work being done in the yard, so engines had to take the long way around to get to the station. "We have to go by the yard," Sion told his driver, but his driver denied him. "We're already late. We don't have time." "But," began Sion. "No but," came the sharp reply. But Sion had no choice. He had to go on with only 6 cars. Right off the bat, there was trouble. Sion had just cleared the yard limits when the brakes came on. When his crew got down to inspect, they found that an air hose had worked loose. Sion sighed. "I knew this was going to happen." The air hose was reconnected, and after a brake test, they set off once more. Sion's first stop was Denville. Much to his surprise, he was diverted off the main line into the narrow gauge platform. "What?" gasped Sion. Sion rolled to a stop beside the station, just as Dean arrived with the passenger cars for the narrow gauge train. "Sion, are you lost?" Dean said sarcastically. "No," Sion retorted. "I have an unlucky number of cars." Then Sion explained about the number 6. "Trust a mainline engine to think of something so ridiculous," Dean sniffed. Sion reversed onto the main line and continued on his journey. But it did not go smoothly. That afternoon, some teens snuck into the seaport. After walking around not doing anything, they decided to randomly throw a switch. Old man Seamus, one of the chief dockhands, saw the teens and shouted, "Get out of here before I make ye walk the plank." The teens scampered off. Just then, Sion had arrived on his way to the ferry terminal. Seamus then noticed the teens tampered with the switch. "Shiver me timbers," he exclaimed. "Hinton, go warn Sion. I'll get the switch." Seamus tried to reset the switch, but it seemed jammed. Sion rounded the bend and saw Hinton waving his hands like mad. "Stop!" shouted Sion. His driver wasted no time throwing the train into emergency. Seamus was still struggling with the switch, but when he saw Sion getting close, he jumped clear. Sion veered into the old pier, slid down the slope, and into the ocean. "This is insane," he spluttered. The passengers were not hurt, only a little shaken. Larry came to the rescue. First, he pulled the passenger cars clear and took the passengers to the ferry terminal. Then he helped the crane pull Sion back to safety. After a short rest, he got ready to take everyone home. Larry looked back at his train. He had the crane, the boom car, Penny and Kennedy, the tool car, and the caboose. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll be right back. Larry then found a random gondola and added it to the end of the train. "Better be safe than sorry," said Larry. For the first time that day, Sion was able to smile. "How long was Sion out of service?" asked Adien. "Not that long," answered Larry. "His traction motors were still in good shape, so they just had to dry them out and clean them." "Do you have another story?" Adien asked. Larry pondered again. "Oh, I have a good one. This actually happened to me last summer." "And this is the other story," Larry told him. One morning, Alex asked Larry, along with Penny and Kennedy, to run a passenger service along the coast. The first station was a small one. It had a small yard where Tamara, the small diesel, lived and worked, and adjacent to that was a small dock with a small building. "What's that?" asked Larry. "That's for Steve," Tamara answered. "Who's Steve?" Before Tamara could answer, he heard a loud buzzing noise. Larry groaned. "He's one of those airplanes." Larry didn't care too much for airplanes. He found them noisy, and the few he had met often boasted about taking his passengers away. "Hello, I'm Steve. What's your name?" "Larry," came the grumpy reply. "What's the matter?" Steve asked cheekily. "Are you out of puff?" Larry wheezed steam. "I'm not," he scoffed. "I have plenty. I could even beat you to the seaport." "So you want a race?" Steve quizzed. "Yes," huffed Larry. An excited Tamara agreed to be the grand marshal. "On your marks, get set, go!" Larry's wheels slipped as he started, while Steve skid across the water and into the air. Larry puffed as fast as he could, but he couldn't catch Steve, who wasn't even flying at his full speed. When he arrived at the ferry terminal, he found Steve floating in the water, waiting. "What took you so long?" chuckled Steve. "Did you run out of steam?" "No, I didn't," replied Larry. "I was just warming up. I'll race you back." So, after Larry's passengers boarded, they started again. And just like earlier, Larry couldn't get enough speed. As Larry puffed along, he saw a track branching off. It was known as the Inland Route. It's a secondary single-track line that runs to Glendale Seaport. It's often used if there's a blockage or derailment on the actual coastline. This gave Larry a naughty idea. The next morning, Steve was chatting with Tamara when Larry arrived. "Good morning, Steve," called Larry. "You up for a rematch?" "You can't be serious," Tamara groaned. "I am," Larry puffed proudly. "Okay, you're on," agreed Steve. Tamara gave the countdown and they set off. Steve took the lead, but Larry wasn't worried. He took the switch to the inland line. Larry arrived at the ferry terminal just as Steve came in for a landing. "How did you get here first? I didn't see you pass me." "I must have been going so fast, I became a blur." "No worries, I will race you again." So Steve took off into the sky, while Larry took a shortcut. When Larry arrived at the seaplane dock, he found Tamara waiting for him. "How did you manage to beat Steve back here?" she asked suspiciously. "Easy, I'm fast, he isn't," Larry replied arrogantly. Tamara was not convinced. Neither was Steve. He kept circling back, but could not find Larry. "I don't know how he beat me," he said to himself. "Never mind him," said his pilot. "We must get back home. There's a storm coming." As they began flying toward home, the pilot noticed something horrifying. "We have no fuel. We must land now." Larry and Tamara were still at the station when the call came in. "Steve's pilot just called. He's run out of fuel and is in danger." Larry and Tamara didn't say a word. They raced to the rescue. They found him floating in the water. "Steve, are you okay?" called Tamara. "For now, but I don't know for how long." "Hang on tight," shouted Larry. His driver took a chain out of his cab and threw it to Steve's pilot. He caught it and attached it to Steve, and the other end was attached to Larry. Larry and Tamara pulled hard against the waves. Soon Steve was brought safely back to shore. A tugboat eventually came and towed Steve to the seaplane dock. "I'm sorry, Steve," Larry apologized. "I shouldn't have cheated." "No, you shouldn't have," snapped Tamara. "Can you ever forgive me?" "Yes," Steve replied. "No hard feelings." "Come on, Larry," said his driver. "Miss Carroll needs us back at the big station." "I must be off. Duty calls," puffed Larry, and with a friendly whistle, he steamed away. "Do you still see Steve and Tamara?" asked Adien. Oh, yes, every time I go to the coast, Larry answered. I sometimes even have to drop off cars at the station for Tamara's branch line, so the three of us always end up having a chat while I'm switching. Well, we've been here a while, said Dennis. Let's go get some dinner. Okay, Dad, replied Adien. Nice talking to you, Larry. Same here, Larry smiled. Hopefully next time I have more stories for you. Dennis and Adien then walked back across the tracks toward the station. Larry liked being a really useful steam engine, but one of the things that made him the happiest is making someone's day.